Welcome back to McNulty's Book Corral. Thanks for checking in. I appreciate that. I appreciate the recent comments. People have been commenting on some of the episodes lately. That's really cool. Thank you very much. I will try to reciprocate and do that for you as well, so you can get those crazy algorithms moving, whatever that means, and have fun with these channels. For you new viewers to my channel, I have a simple goal here. I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to hopefully recommend a book along the way that you might not have read, and you might read it and like it. And if you don't like it, that's good too. We're all friends here. We don't have any type of agenda here. Today we're talking about Charles L. Harness, science fiction writer, 1915-2005. I will double check that date and make certain that I have it correctly. In 1949, he published a story in a pulp magazine called Startling Stories, and that story was called Flight into Yesterday. And here is the 1953 hardcover that followed the pulp magazine appearance. And isn't this great cover artwork, by the way? I will have the scan up here so you can look at this. Flight into Yesterday. Charles L. Harness. I love this era for science fiction. This is a really strange book. I mean, everything Harness wrote is kind of strange. Charles Harness is not an easy science fiction writer to pigeonhole. And we're going to discuss that, why I feel that way. With this book, he covers a wide range of things. So it was published in Startling Stories in 1949. And then it was published in the hardcover. And then 53, 54, it was republished yet again as an ace double, but the title was changed. The title by which it is known today, which is The Paradox Men. Here is the 1966 UK Science Fiction Book Club edition. I don't have the ace double where it was renamed. I'm going to have to find it, though, because I went through all of my ace doubles, and I didn't have it. The flip side of that ace double was Jack Williamson, Dome Around America. Does that sound familiar? Stephen King's Under the Dome. I suspect Stephen King is a very well-read man. I'm not saying he copied anybody. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm saying there was a similarity in the plot. And it's kind of cool. Jack Williamson was one of the greats as well. So anyways, I don't have that ace double, but it was retitled as The Paradox Men, and that is the title by which it is known today. The book was very well received. In the 1966 UK edition, it has an introductory essay by Brian Aldiss. Brian W. Aldiss was himself a fantastic writer of science fiction. So, and he really puts it in perspective too. So I only own the two copies. The first edition when it was still called Flight into Yesterday, and then I have the Paradox Men UK edition from the mid-60s. I will have to track down that ace double. Let's talk about the story. The story is an indication of Harness's great intelligence. He was a lawyer by profession, and he was quite successful at everything he did. He was somebody who understood the current thinking. So 49, 50s through the 50s. Obviously, he was familiar with Einstein because in the Paradox Men, there are several elements of current trends, current thinking in science and philosophy that he is right on with. Einstein's theory of relativity is a factor in this book. Toynbee, Arnold Toynbee's, who was a philosopher. Arnold Toynbee put forth the idea that civilization would rise because of creative population responding to challenges, and they would find ways to make society work, and hence a culture is created. For Harness, the contrast of science versus creativity is the central theme of several of his books. Certainly in this one, where he blatantly refers to a sect of people as Toynbeans. So there's a couple of elements in this book I want to talk about too, in addition to the fact that he's on top of the science, he's on top of the cultural studies of civilization and society, social studies and so forth. He is right there with it. He does have some gobbledygook as far as scientific explanations early in the novel about various things, and he just made it up, but it sounds great. One of the really strange elements in this book is set in the future with an imperial America. And in the future, there are no guns, or there are guns, there are some explosives, but people aren't using guns, they're using swords again. So what does this become? It becomes a swashbuckling adventure. Now, Brian W. Aldiss, in this edition, in his essay, points out that Harness took it seriously. He didn't play it up for comedy. Although it's very breezy and it's very exciting in those action scenes. Very well done, a lot of tension and so forth. But he's not making a parody of swashbucklers. He just is using the device of swords as the common weapon at the time. There is a group of people in the society is totalitarian, okay? And there's a group of people in this society called the Thieves, of which the main character his name is Alar, and he's a thief. The government puts up with them, but they have cross purposes. Very interesting take on self-determinism and rebelling against a totalitarian society in here. Einstein's theories on time dilation, meaning that an object in motion moves at experiences time at a slower rate, is very much a factor in the plot, as is the Toynbee philosophy of civilization. Harness doesn't really take a stance too much on either, because in his books he's inconsistent. But the theme of science versus art is consistent in his work. We encounter it time and time again. It's interesting. So science, in one way, is militaristic and is used for military purposes. The creations of science, weaponry, and so forth, scientific thinking used to control a population. And then we have science, which we'll get to in the final book I talk about. Science plays a different role completely. But science versus art is very much a theme here. Science controlling a civilization and self-determinism, responding to challenges. So it's kind of a mixed bag of themes, motifs, and ideas. And it's a short novel. This is like I said, this one looks thicker because there's a larger font. So, and I prefer the Flight into Yesterday. So he's dealing with these issues, and he has these swashbuckling elements in these really exciting action scenes where they're fencing and they're using swords. I'm not going to give spoilers away the way this ends, but the way this book ends is perfectly represented by this cover artwork, incidentally. So find it. If you haven't read The Paradox Men by Charles Harness, pick it up and read it. I don't know, I just think it's it's really a fascinating book. It has more of a breezy, true Pulp Fiction attitude to it because of the swashbuckling going on in a futuristic society. Space travel does exist and so forth. There's a mystery involved in this, so he's mixing elements here really quickly and really effectively. It is a book I'm fond of. I've read it several times now. So, for those of you that haven't read that, go ahead and see if you can pick that up. The next one is about the same time, 1953. He published a short story called The Rose. This is a much later paperback edition, my dog-eared copy. And The Rose is really a novella. There's actually 3 stories included in this, but I'm only talking about the novella, the big one, The Rose, which is about, again, the confrontation of science and art. So we have we have a psychiatrist who's trying to write a musical piece involving a rose. Rose is a motif that occurs throughout the story. We have the conflict of science versus art predominant in The Rose. It is the heart and soul of the plot, as analogy, as metaphor, as motifs, as themes, right across the top. This book, by the way, the writing compared to The Paradox Men, this is really written in a slightly different style for Harness. Really lush and beautifully written. I really enjoyed it. It was good. So here's a little opening from Chapter 3. This is how Chapter 3 opens, and I want to read it because you get an idea on how Harness, when he wanted to, he could be really quite poetic and lush in his descriptions. Chapter 3 begins this way. She dreamed that she danced alone in the moonlight, that she fluttered in solitary circles in the moonlight, fascined and appalled by the thing she must do to create a red rose. She dreamed that she sang a strange and magic song, a wondrous series of chords, the song that she had so long sought. Pain buoyed her on her excruciating wings, then flung her heavily to earth. The red rose was made, and she was dead. So that type of thing, really interesting. And at the end, it's just perfect. I don't like giving endings away. A short little read here. I have met many, but not all of Harness's work. I'm going to cover a couple of more later. So I don't want this to be a really long episode, but then his last book is my favorite. And this is really a tough sell. Charles L. Harness wrote Sybil with Bluebonnets. What a strange title. This was published by the NESFA Press, and it was published in 2002, and this is my original copy. I don't believe this has ever been reprinted. It may have been. I've never seen a reprint of this, so I think there was a low print run on this. So how to describe this? Once again, science. Science plays a role here. Time plays a role here. Yet again, we see the same themes in his books, but they are expressed differently each time. He's over here firmly looking at science as in opposition to creativity. And then in here, science plays a pivotal role in the plot, but not necessarily in a negative way. He reverses it here. This book also has a very strong religious background to it. Subplot in it involves the Holy Grail. So here's the rundown on this book. It basically reads like a memoir of Harness's boyhood, teen years in West Texas in the late 20s and 30s. And when you're reading it, you're thinking, okay, I'm reading an autobiography. Of course, he mixes it up then. In this book, the main character, Joe Barnes, falls in love with his high school chemistry teacher. I don't believe they even teach chemistry in high school anymore in the United States, but I know they used to. I had a chemistry class. And so there are a lot of descriptions in Harness's book about chemistry, in this one especially about science. He'll explain the science behind things. Most of the time it's right on. It's an accurate depiction of what he's talking about. Sometimes it's hooey. It's made up, but he makes it sound convincing. He falls in love with the chemistry teacher, and after high school, he's becoming a chemist himself. He's inspired by her. They meet up again, and they are together in love. She's 7 years older than him. And so then it becomes a love story. He's talking here about the chemistry that they're doing in classes, and there's a lot of that, I think, that for some people will slow the narrative down. Then he has this subplot where the character is an agnostic, but everybody around him is faith-based. Again, in that Texas church, they have what they believe to be the actual Holy Grail, basically a cup. He explains later what that's all about, and I'm not going to go into it. If you're going to read this, everything should be a surprise to you. I'm just giving you basic plot elements. I really love this book, though. And the religious aspect will be a major factor in the last half of the book, the last third, in a way I didn't expect. So I've now read this book, by the way, 3 times. I just read it last week. Science, again, except this time science is a role in it. He's talking about the pheromones, the excretions that affect our social behavior, the aura. It's not really an aura. It's a chemical reaction. The excretions of pheromones are a chemical reaction that involve hunger and sex, in personalities, and everything is involved in that. And he discusses that at length. And that's an underlying theme as well, that chemistry science throughout, and the incredibly interesting tale involving his true love, this woman that he becomes lovers with. There are some tragedies involved, so I'm not giving away spoilers. I'm not going to tell you who they're involved with, but Mr. Joe Barnes here is going to learn a lot in life by the time he's in college. And what happens then involves spiritual aspects of the soul, let's say, life after death, a rebirth in some ways, not that different than what we found in the Paradox Men. I'm not going to explain how that plays into that book as well. That book is less religious in its implication. It's more speculative fiction. This one has a religious aspect. It has the science fiction in a way, but it's not blatant. You know, you wouldn't read this book and immediately think this is a science fiction novel. You might think it's a supernatural novel in a way, because there's mysterious things happening that relate to the faith of the surrounding characters, including his chemistry teacher, his science teacher. The conflict here is much less of a situation where they're butting heads than where science and faith and self-determinism are factors together in the future of several of these characters, which is quite astonishing. Sybil with Bluebonnets. Bluebonnets. You'll learn immediately when you start reading this book why he named it that. It's probably not a great title, but if you understand the book, you'll understand Sybil with Bluebonnets and pheromones and that attraction. Now, one last thing to talk about here, because I really want someone listening to this needs to read this book. There's a habit that Harness has where he'll do something that a lot of editors and publishers would edit. They would edit it out, or they would tell him to rewrite it and shorten it. In this book, he does that on about halfway through. There's a pivotal event happening, and he introduces a character, and then he takes 6 pages to flashback to how he first met that character. Of course, it involves science and chemistry and so forth. It does slow down the narrative. He does that a lot, but usually he doesn't get overzealous with it. But in this book, he has that one part where he does it. I forgive him for it because I like the book so much. It's like, okay, he might have cut that down a little bit or fixed it in a different way so that we know the backstory of this character, who only appears here. Anyways, stylistic choices here with Harness. He can be difficult to read when he gets bogged down with the details. But the payoff, my friends, is there. So of the 3, I recommend all of them. My favorite is Sybil with Bluebonnets. Charles L. Harness, what a remarkable writer. I've had a lot of interesting discussions with people about this book. I've never yet met anybody that truly hates it. I have talked to people who have read it, and because of Harness's style, they're not totally enamored with it. But they all agreed it's a remarkably different type of science fiction novel. Why don't you find it, read it, and do a video on it and let me know. It's okay to disagree with me, by the way. Until next time, my friends, by the time this video appears, I'm in a boat. and it's just days from now. I'm going to post this, and then I'm already there. So, and then I'll be back here. Stay well, stay happy. Feed your brain. Travel in time with Charles Harness. Read a book.